Okay, hello everybody, this is Bob Coppedge with Michelle Bubbalo. We're talking about our 15th monthly webinar. Well, we've done 15 of them so far.
Wow.
Dealing with Microsoft Office. This one's going to be a follow-up to last year's Visio. This one's Visio 2013 Extras. As a side note, as I was just talking with Michelle, Microsoft has released the preview version of the next edition of Office for Windows 10. That is now available if you are trying out Windows 10, and actually it's pretty cool. You can actually go to the Windows Store and look up Word Preview. And there's a preview for Excel, for PowerPoint, and for Word. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, our luncheonar in April is actually going to be dealing with that, so stay tuned. And let's see. As we point out, hopefully you can hear us. If you can't, then I don't know why you're listening to me. But you basically can go ahead and check us out via email or phone if you're having any questions or problems. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat window, and we'll try to keep an eye on all that. Okay, as we've mentioned before, we've got a couple of new services, Simplex DBA, dealing with corporate database, and Simplex PM, dealing with project management. And let's see, which leads us to, we actually now are at the point where we're doing 4 online or in-person events each month now here at Simplex-IT, because apparently we don't have anything better to do. So we're doing this, which is the Office webinar. We also have our luncheonar, which is both in-person and online. That's going to be on the 18th. We're dealing with security strategies for small, medium businesses, specifically the IT strategies. That one's going to be interesting. Then we've got the day after that, managing project resources with Patty Smirk, who's running our Simplex PM practice. And then we're going to be talking about database performance on the 24th with Doug Tombo. And then we'll be back here with the Office, access tables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As we point out to everybody, one of our core requirements here for Simplex-IT is we want to share our knowledge. We want to share our data with folks who are, whether you're our customer or you're not, we think that's important. We're almost to 100,000 views on our videos up on YouTube. So we think we've proven that that's who we are and that's what we do. So anyhow, okay. Again, if you want more specialized training, if this kind of delivery makes sense to you, because in a lot of cases, companies do not want to send their people out for a day long of training, or they only want to have focused training on one specific aspect. They only want to know how to do, mail merge in Word, or how to do pivot tables in Excel. We can actually put together a customized focus training session for you and your folks we think at a really good price. So if you're interested, give us a call.
OneNote.
And OneNote. Now, we're going to be giving out a copy of Office Professional 2013 to one attendee. And we only got about 4 or 5 people here attending. So what's going to happen is Michelle is going to ask a question based on stuff that she covered towards the end. And if you know that and text the message, or put it into the text window, you could win a copy of Office Professional 2013, and you would be the envy of every one of your friends. If you had friends. If you have friends, please let me know what it's like. I've been wondering that myself. So, okay. And I think with that, I am done. So I'm going to turn this over to Michelle.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Today's webinar is the Visio Extras. Today, in the last Visio webinar, we covered the basics, creating flowcharts, org charts, some basics. Today, we're going to be covering some other diagrams, such as the schedule diagrams, the calendar, the timeline. We're going to look at the working with your own custom stencil and backgrounds. We're going to look at working with containers and the brainstorming diagram, working with the legend, how to create layers in Visio, how to import Excel into a organizational chart, and how to do some other features. So with that in mind, hopefully you can see my screen, and I have opened up a flowchart diagram. So whenever you open a diagram in Visio, what happens is you automatically get some stencils on the left-hand side of that diagram. Also, sometimes you will get a extra ribbon depending on the particular diagram. In the flowchart, we don't get an extra ribbon, but we do get the stencils on the left. Now, as we talked about in the first one, and if you're familiar with Visio, even though it brings up stencils for this particular diagram, that doesn't mean that you can't pull stencils from other diagrams or create your own stencil. So up here where it says more shapes on the left-hand side, if I click on that, it'll bring up the categories of the different diagrams that are in Visio. And if I scroll down, I can actually, let's say I go to Maps and Floor Plans, and I go to Map, and then I go to Landmark Shapes. I can actually click on that and bring up that stencil from that particular diagram, even though it doesn't come with the flowchart diagram. So then I can just take the one I want, drag it on there, and use it. Also, there is a little search box right here that I can click on, and if I want to, I can also type in a shape that I'm looking for, and if it exists in the Visio program, then you can take it and drag it onto your diagram that way too. So you can have a little search box to search for them, and then you can also search for them, but a lot of times you may not. The more familiar you become with the diagrams in Visio, then you'll know where some of those stencils exist. But if you don't, that's why you have the search box. Now, the other thing you can do is also create your own stencil. So if I go to More Shapes, down here it says New Stencil, and it has it broken up into US units or metric. So, of course, we're going to use US, but, you know, if you need the metric, they're there. So I'm going to click on the and that just has to do with the sizing and the size of the shapes and stuff. So I'm going to hit the New Stencil, and then when I hit it, I'm going to click over here, and when I right-click on it, I'm going to go to Save. And you can let the stencil default to the Shape Stencil folder for Visio, or if it's easier for you to know where exactly your stencils are stored, you might have a Visio folder, then you can also store it anywhere you want. You don't have to go with the default, but I'm going to go to the desktop. I already have a little Visio webcast folder here. I'm not even going to put it there. I'm just going to call it My Stencil. Call it whatever you want. Then all you have to do is take a shape that you want, and you can then drag it right onto, actually I'm going to do the star. So I'm going to just drag it onto my stencil. And then if you click once here, it always says like Master 2 or Master 1 for the shape. You just click once right on top of the text, and then you type whatever you want to call it. Now, you can also, if you go to Insert and you go to Pictures, let's say that you have some pictures, like here I have a logo. So I'm going to open that logo, and here it is. And so if I want, I can also drag that onto the stencil. Now, when you drag it onto the stencil, it moves it off the diagram. So if you want to keep it on the diagram, hold your Control key down, then drag it onto your stencil, click, and I'm going to just call this my Simplex-IT logo, and hit Enter. And I can also pull things from the internet. So here, because Valentine's Day is coming up on Saturday, I'm going to right-click on one of the images. I'm going to copy that image. I'm going to paste it in my Visio diagram. Hopefully, it'll paste. Hello. Nope, that's not the right thing. Okay. Let's see. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will go to Bing, because sometimes the Bing, which is the Microsoft too much time on this. I'll go to Images. Sometimes the Bing images copy better than the actual Google ones, just because when you're dealing with Microsoft. So I'll go ahead and I'll see if I try that, see if that works. There we go. So now I'm going to take that one and drag it onto my, and then I'm going to name it. So I'm done customizing my stencil. Now, one of the things you'll notice is anytime you edit your stencil, you'll see a little save button on the right. So it's a good idea to, after you've edited the stencil, whether you've added things onto it whatever you've done to it, is to hit the save button so that that stencil is saved. And now I can bring that stencil up in any diagram I want to later, and I will do that after, when I'm done with this. So that's how you create a stencil. You can right click on it if you want to. You can close the stencil if you want to close it. Or you can just, anytime you're working with the diagram, the stencils that are up at the time that you're working with the diagram, if you save the diagram and open it up the next time, all the stencils that you had open when you were creating the diagram will appear. So I'm going to go ahead and actually close this diagram. I'm not going to save this, so I'm going to hit Don't Save. I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to New, and I'm going to hit Schedule. So I'm going to start with talking about some of the schedule diagrams. Now the schedule diagrams, a lot of times the first one I'm going to do is the calendar. And I know a lot of times people have calendars in Outlook, but usually that's for meetings and important stuff. But you want a visual calendar. So maybe you want something to put up or just keep track of things. So, I know a lot of times people will use, they'll use Word tables to create their calendar. They'll do them in Excel. Some people use Publisher. But I'm going to show you how to use the calendar diagram in Visio. So I'm going to click on that calendar. I'm going to hit Create. It's going to bring up some stencils on the left. Now the nice thing about this is if I want to create a monthly calendar over here on the left, I can do monthly, I can do weekly, I can do bi-weekly, and then I could do a day. So I'm going to show you some of these examples. I'm going to pull the month out, drop it onto the page. It'll ask me what month, what year, when the week is supposed to begin, and I'm just going to hit OK. Now, if you notice, it automatically created the days for us. So I have my days here. I can click in one of the dates, and I can actually type in there in that cell. So when I'm done, I can just click on it. Now, if you can't see the text, I can format it. I can make it bigger. I can drag a graphic onto it if I want. Now, there's a little button. Sometimes when you're working with your diagrams, they kind of get off track. And you have to move them or whatever, but there's a little button in the bottom right-hand corner to the right of the zoom box here. It says Fit Page to Current Window. So if you click on it, it will readjust the diagram in the center of the screen. So that's a button I like a lot. Now, the other thing you can do when you're working with your calendars, so, now let's say I want to use that heart to put for Valentine's Day. So now I'm going to show you how to bring up the stencil that I created for myself. I'm going to go to More Shapes. I'm going to go to Open Stencil, because you don't want to go to Open because you would be opening a diagram. Then I'm going to go to the desktop because that's where I saved it. And there it is. So I'm going to open it up. There's my stencils and shapes. I'm going to take the shape that I want. I'm going to drag it onto my calendar. And if you have to size it or whatever, you can do that. You can adjust it. You can even use your arrow keys to move your things around if you need to. And basically, I just used a shape from the stencil that I created. Now, I'm going to also go to Design, and I'm going to click on Colors. Maybe you want to change the color of this particular calendar. And so now you have a visual calendar that you can work with, which is nice, real fast, easy, and you're able to do it quickly. Now, I'm going to go down here, and you notice on the bottom it says Page 1. Well, in Visio, you can have different pages like you can in Excel. So if I double click on it, and I call it February and hit Enter, now I have a February calendar. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to do Duplicate. Now, if you're using 2010 Visio, most of the features here are going to work that I'm showing you. Things like the themes and that will be a little bit different, but you still have the same themes and variants. The only difference here is when you right click, you're going to have to insert a new page because they don't have the duplicate button. So if you click on Duplicate, now you'll notice that I'm on this page and it says February. So you're saying, well, what if I want to change this to March? Well, here's one thing that happens when you're working with a calendar. Up here, you'll notice that there is a new calendar ribbon. You see on the far right-hand side to the right of view. If I click on the word calendar, I can go to this button that says configure and now change this to March and hit OK. Of course it says because I've changed it, I may lose some of the schedule data that I had put in there, which is okay. So I hit OK. And now I could take that out because it's not Valentine's. I can go in here and change the color if I want. Do something green, I guess. That's kind of greenish, I guess. And I'll go with that one. And then I can go in and I can start, you know, if I need to, I can take out the date, whatever I want to do. And now I have a calendar for March. So I can double click here, I can type March, and there you go. So basically, if I just make a and anytime you want to reconfigure the calendar to a different month, you can. Now, the other thing here is if I want, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of size this calendar, make it a little smaller. I'm going to go back to my calendar shapes here. And then on the insert ribbon, I'm going to insert a text box. So I'm going to go ahead and drag a text box over here to the right. And then I'm going to go to the home ribbon and I'm going to move that in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm going to type the word event. And I'm going to then hit the move that text to the left, which if you want, you can do that and you can highlight the part of the text that you want to stay to the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a bullet. Of course, every time I do this, it does this. So I can just do that, take the bullet out. Then I can move that to the right if I want or center, but I'm not going to worry about that. So then I can say 3/17 is St. Patty's Day. Then I could say 3/24 is my meeting with XYZ. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating an event. You can then format it if you want to with your, you know, make your text bigger, change the font color, you know, or the bullets, whatever you want to do, make it bold. If you want to shade because it's a text box, you can go to fill, and then you can just use to fill the colors of it if you want. I don't know why it's not staying. It's always funny, these things just work really different when you're in somewhere else and you just don't know why the fill colors aren't working. But you know what? I'm not worried about it. Oh, there you go. I was inside of it. Okay, so now here's something I'm going to do. I'm going to do Control A. It's going to select everything on that page. I'm going to go to, on the home ribbon, I'm going to go to Group, and then group those together. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my stencil and I'm going to hold my control key down and I'm going to drag this over to my stencil. Now, once you've saved your stencil, what's going to happen is it's going to tell you that it's read only. Do you want to edit? And I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to put it on here and I'm going to put month with events. So now when I create a new page, so there's a little plus here. I can click on it over here to create a new page. I can take it and drop it in, and then I can ungroup it if I need to. That's if I want to edit things on it. I can ungroup it, and I'm going to click on the calendar, reconfigure it, and now I'm going to say this is for April. So now when I do April, and let's just say I pick a different color, now you can see that I have the events. All I have to do now is just click in here, edit the events. I've already got an event calendar created, and I could have duplicated the page too. So, but it's just another way of showing you how to work with the calendar. Now, the other thing about the calendar that's kind of nice is on the calendar tab, you can import your Outlook data into a visual calendar. So even though you can print your calendar, maybe you want to add the Outlook appointments that you have on your calendar and make more of a visual with using the Visio diagram. So you can actually import it. So I have a little calendar here that, if I can show you real quick, I have some things on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And then it says import appointments from, so I'm going to say February 1st through February 28th, and next. So you've got this little, like, what do you want to see? I wanted to see the month, I want to, you go through the questions that it asks you and you hit finish. And so now if you notice, it actually imported the calendar from Outlook into the calendar in Visio. So now I can use the features from here and I can work with the calendar that way. So that's just another way of doing it. And then finally, if I go into a new page, just to show you the multiple weeks, you just bring it up and you pick the weeks you want. This one here, right here is just the week. If you just want a week, you can do a year. You can pull out the year. This is like a thumbnail. So for 2015, you can't type in it, but you can, do things like, put a push pin in there if you need to. You can then pull out, what you could do is you could do, anytime it says thumbnail, it's just basically, so I could say pull February out, and then I can pull a particular day, so I can say, I'm going to pull the 16th out, and then I can just type in that if I want. You can put symbols on there if you want. You can do whatever you want to do. You can do flags. You can do important. There's a little note here I'm going to pull out. And the only reason I'm showing this, because I'm going to say type note. If you notice that sometimes objects, the text doesn't go inside of it. But you'll notice like this little yellow square. If you put your mouse on it, you can actually move the text and put it anywhere you want. So if you want to put the text in the note, or if you want to put it on top or the bottom. And the reason I'm telling you that, because there's a lot of little images in Visio that when you type the text, it always appears in a certain place, and you can always move that wherever you want. Just put your mouse on the yellow diamond. Now, the other thing is, before I end the calendar one, I'm going to bring out the moon phase. And if you right click on the moon phase, you can change it to a full moon, to a first quarter. And I don't know why you would care about that unless you were a werewolf. So, I mean, that's just something that I thought was kind of funny. So I've done a calendar diagram. I'm going to save my diagram. So I'm going to save it on my desktop. And I'm going to call it calendar, just in case I need to use it later. And then I'm going to go ahead and close it. Now, one of the things it's asking me, because when I was editing my stencil, I forgot to click on the save button. Do you want to save your stencil? And I want to hit yes. So a lot of times you got to watch, because you might not want the diagram, but you've edited the stencil. And you go to hit it and you're not reading the box, and you say, no, I don't want to save the diagram. Well, the first question came up was, do you want to save the stencil? So if you say don't save, you lose the stuff that you put on it. So you have to be very careful that if you don't hit the save button first before you hit the save button in the diagram, make sure you're reading the box. So I'm going to hit save, and now it's saved. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go back to Schedules. I'm going to pull out the timeline diagram and show you how to do a little timeline here. So you have different timelines that you can pull. You can do a block timeline, one that looks like a line. You have, I'm going to pull the cylinder. And if you have 2010, you have a few more timeline styles than you do in this version of Visio. And so then I'm going to pick, so for this one, I'm going to say January to February. So I'm going to go to the end of February on my timeline. And I wanted to display, like right now I have 2 months, but I wanted to display weeks on the timeline. So I'm going to choose the scale and hit OK. And now if you notice my timeline, you can see that I have my different weeks for January, February. I can increase the size of it. And now I also have a timeline ribbon. So these diagrams that we're using, a lot of the ones that we're using today, have their own ribbon that go with them. The reason for that is if I wanted to reconfigure the time on here, I could go to Configure and I could reset that if I wanted to include March, or if I just wanted 1 month. I could also go to the time format, which is also this date and time format button here, and I could choose to reformat the text at the beginning, how I want it, and then in between. So if I wanted to display it this way, I can. So I can have the date here, and then I can have the weeks here, and you can see how it's displaying. That's not displaying it, right? Is it? Oh, no, that's just the day and the year. You know what? I don't want that one. I actually want the actual date. There we go. That's the one I want. Okay, so now you have, and now you see over here, you have these little milestones that you can put up here. So like, for instance, the pin milestone, I'm just going to drag it, and then it's going to ask me to pick the date. So let's say I pick the 17th, and I'm going to put a description, meet with Sue, and then I'm going to hit OK. I always spelled Sue wrong, but hit OK. So now it actually jumps to that date on my timeline. I'm going to go ahead and put another one in here. Let's just say that I choose the X timeline, and I'll put that one on as the 22nd, and I'll type conference call. You know what? I'm going to put one as, yeah, that's January, so that's right, conference call. And I'll hit OK. There you go. See how it jumps? Now, the other thing you may notice sometimes too is with Visio, if any object goes outside of the page, it creates a new page. So when you're moving your images around, you'll notice that it automatically creates a second page if it's too big, if you're moving around. If you just drag it back or drag it down, notice how everything comes with it, and then I just go back to one page. Now, the other thing is, if you notice when I click here, I've got that yellow square. So if I wanted to move the milestone here and I wanted to move the text down, I just grab that yellow square on my timeline. Now, there's also a today marker, and if you grab it and let go, it jumps to today's date. I'm going to take the expanded timeline. Let's say I want to pull a week out of that. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to pull the week of, I'll pick this week, the 9th through the 13th. But because it's a week, I want it to display the days. And if I hit OK, now you can see that it's an expanded timeline, a smaller version, and it just extracts a week that I want out of that timeline. The colors that you notice here, that's based on the themes. So again, you can go in and you can change your theme colors if you need to, if you're not particularly liking the colors that you want, or you can manually change them if you want. The other thing that you can do too is you have these little brackets that you can pull out. So if there's a particular, let's say I wanted, let's go back to February, I wanted to pull out the 4th, and I wanted to pull out the 4th through the 6th. So you can see the bracket jumps to that particular time. And because I'm going to open up PowerPoint and pull it over here. And I'm going to do a slide. And I'm going to go ahead and choose blank. So I'm going to go ahead on the Visio diagram, and I'm going to do Control A. That's going to copy the whole thing, then Control C. And then I'm going to go to the PowerPoint slide, and I'm going to do Control V or paste, and notice that I copied the timeline, and you can see it on my screen. The other thing I wanted to mention, when you're in Visio, if you hit your F5 key, it will go full screen on you. So if you had a link in a PowerPoint presentation to a Visio diagram and you wanted to display it full screen, you could also do that by hitting F5. I'm going to hit Escape, and that's going to bring it back. You notice at the bottom of the Visio diagram, there is a presentation mode button that you can click on, and you can basically you do it that way too. Now, the other thing that I wanted to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on the new button to bring up a new page. And I have a little project file out here, Microsoft Project, and I'm going to import it into, now I know that project has a timeline, but this one will be a more visual timeline, so I'm going to import that little list of data that I have from project. And so it says select a Microsoft Project file to import. So I'm going to hit Browse. And on my desktop, here is the, where'd it go? for a second. Oh, they're out here. Let me move them back into the folder. All right, let's see if that works. All right, so import data. There it is. Visio project for importing. Hit open. Next. I'm going to do top level task and milestones. Hit next. You can choose what type of timeline you want. If you want a divided timeline, the cylinder, what type of milestones do you want them to look at, all the stuff you can go through. I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to hit finish. And it's going to import my project into a timeline. So you can see the timeline. It took the tasks that were in my project and it dumped it into the timeline in Visio. Now, the other thing is you can also take that and export it to project. So if you were working on a timeline and you wanted to go ahead and import it into Microsoft Project, you could do that. So it says the project has been successfully imported. I'm going to minimize this, and you know why? Because the desktop, here it is. I'm working on two different monitors here, so it's making it a little hard. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up. There it is. You can see if I hit the scroll to task button, there they are. I can highlight them. I'm going to change the task mode to, hold on. I'm going to go ahead and go to the information window. I'm going to check them to auto scheduled, and I'm going to make sure it says as soon as possible. This takes any constraints off the task, and then I'm going to go ahead and link them, and then I have my tasks are linked. And you can go ahead and do whatever you want with it. So it just took those and dumped them right into Microsoft Project. So you can see how you can use the timeline with project software, which is basically what it was meant to work with. So with that in mind, I'm going to close this one. I'm going to save it and just call it project. Oh, what was this one? This is the timeline one. All right, and then I'm going to close it. Now, one more thing with the schedule. If I go to schedules and I go to the Gantt chart, which is right here, and hit create, it's going to ask me, I'm going to go one task, and there's a reason why I'm saying that. Because even though you can print the Gantt chart in project, you might want to import it into a Visio diagram. So I'm going to go to the Gantt chart ribbon. I'm going to go to import data. Again, information that is already stored in a file. Microsoft Project. You can import it from Excel too if you want. I'm going to pull that again. And I'm going to hit next. You can figure all that out. I'm going to hit next, 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 finish. So if you do use Microsoft Project, it's going to add those rows right in, and my timeline, right into my, so you can see I have a visual. So that whole project that it just imported right into the Gantt chart in Microsoft Visio. So if you do use that, I just wanted you to see how it works and how you can work with Project and Visio, how you can work with Outlook and Visio using the calendar. And so those are some of the things that you can do with the importing, exporting. So I'm going to close this particular diagram. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to go and actually I am going to open a diagram that I have called servers to show containers. So I have some servers. I'm using the network diagram here, and you can see that it has some things over here on the left. And what I did is I brought up and I created some servers over here, and I wanted to look at the container option. And there's two ways that you can create containers. Containers will hold a group of objects. So if I click over here where it says container and I pick a different style, and again, the styles vary depending on the version that you're using, and then I highlight the containers the servers that I want. I'm just going to drag and drop them right into the container. And then when I move the container, notice how the objects go with it. And then if I wanted to, I could just click here where it says heading and type East Coast. So now I have my objects in that container. Also, you may notice that I have a guide here, a line. And when I drag the container, it has a little green dot, so it automatically snaps and allows me to line up things. Then when the container is selected on the Format ribbon, there is Fit to Contents if you want to shrink it down. You can change the heading style based on the type of container that you picked. The other thing is, if you notice that when you hover over an object, you get the little auto connect buttons on, and you'll do this like in flowcharts and stuff. So if I wanted to add another server, I could click on this button. I could click on this if I wanted to. They give you just a couple different ones that you can add if you need to, or you can just drag it from here and drag it on. And it'll automatically, if you notice, when I do hover, it'll automatically increase the size of the container. Now, the other way to do that is to hover to select the objects, right-click, go to Container, and hit Add New Container. And then you can see it automatically picked the container to put the objects in. And when I move the objects, the container goes with it. Now, if you lock a container and you click on an object and hit your delete key, it says you can't delete the shape. So you can't delete the shape out of the container. You may have seen this in other shapes that you work with in Visio, and that's because of the lock feature. If I click on the container and delete the container, all the objects in the container are deleted. If I hit Select Contents and I decide I want to increase the font size or change the color or whatever it is that I want to do, I can still select all the objects in the container even though it's locked, and it'll help allow me to format. Then, if you want to get rid of the container and, keep the objects, unlock it, and then disband the container. And then the objects are out of the container if you need to. The other thing you'll notice over here, just a little thing on, so those are just containers. They're just a way of grouping your objects together and working with them. Now, the other thing, too, is if you want to, there's like the little Ethernet here that you can pull out. And what I like to tell people about this, because a lot of times they just don't know, is if you see those yellow squares, just click and drag out. You can actually add whatever you need to add to, like if I wanted to put a printer in here. And when you click on it and you see the little yellow boxes, you can actually get rid of lines. You can add lines. So just because you don't have one sticking out doesn't mean you can't create it. You can do the same thing with the ring network too. If you pull those out, you can actually create additional lines just by clicking and dragging those different little yellow squares. And here's another example of where the yellow square is. If you want to move the text to the top or to the right, again, when the text doesn't go inside the object, then you can just use that yellow square to move the text around. So that is working with containers. So I'm going to go ahead and close this particular diagram. I'm going to go ahead and, I'll save it. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention before I do that is this guide here. I was mentioning this guide, and how I got the guide was I went up into the ruler and I just dragged down. So if you drag down, come on, hold your control key down and drag, you can actually get that guide, or hold the control key down and then you can just keep making guides that way too. So you can see as I'm holding the control key down, I'm getting more guides. So in 2010, you just have to click in the ruler and drag. So sometimes between 10 and 13, they're a little different the way you do things. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm just going to say don't save. All right, so now I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to New, and under the Business template or category, I'm going to pull out the brainstorming diagram. This is a cool diagram that a lot of people don't use. There's a line window here. I'll talk about this later. I'm actually going to close that for right now. And then up here, there's a brainstorming ribbon. Now, something that I'm going to do a little differently is I'm not going to use the shapes that are on the stencil over here. I'm actually going to use the shapes that are up here on the ribbon. So when I click on Main, I'm going to go ahead and type Course Offerings. And then I'm going to select this main topic, hit Multiple Topics. Notice that it says type your topic, then press Enter for each new topic. So I'm going to type Word, Enter, Excel, Enter, Visio, Enter, and then Outlook. And then I'm going to hit OK. And notice how it makes branches automatically. Then I'm going to click on Word. I'm going to hit Multiple Topics. I'm going to type Intro, Enter, Intermediate, Enter, and Advanced. And I'm going to hit OK again. And it just keeps branching off. So that way, I automatically create this brainstorming diagram. If you had used this one here, you get your main topic and you put your multiple topics on top and you know, A, B, C, and you hit OK. It didn't create the branches. I have to automatically connect them myself. And to me, why do that when it was so much easier to just use the one up here? If you hit auto arrange, it'll automatically change the layout of it every time you add different ones. If you don't like what it does, just hit undo. You could go to layout and you can actually change the layout of the diagram. So whatever you decide to pick, I'm going to pick the second one, left to right. Then I'm going to select the word diagram or word bar here, line, and I'm going to move topic to new page. So I'm going to say new page, OK. And now what happens is when I go to page 1, there's an arrow. Now, if you hold your control key down, you can click on it to go to the next one, or if you hit F5, then you can hit the arrow. It'll jump to that branch. And if you had another branch here, you could click on it and go to the next page and the next page. So it just would be like separate pages for yourself. Now you may say to yourself, well, how do I redo? How do I reconnect it? Well, of course I could hit undo, but what happens if you close it and you open it back up and now you want to, bring it back to the previous page? Just select the word, hit move topic to new page, go back to existing page and hit OK, and notice how it reconnected it. So there you go. You can change the topic style when you're going, well, okay, or you can go to diagram style and you can actually change the whole thing if you want. You can change the design theme, in which we've talked about those before, depending on what you want to do. Now, the other thing here with and then on the outline window, that outline window, you notice that it says drawing 8 because I haven't named this yet. But if I click on it and expand it out, I could right click and I could, here I could add a main topic if I want. I could just add subtopics this way. I could also type in here if I wanted to do it that way too. And then you can also import data from somewhere or export the data if you want. Now, the other thing that comes with the brainstorming diagram is a legend shape. And the legend is really cool because you can use it in other diagrams, like your flowcharts, your org charts. So I take the legend box and I drag it onto there was a legend stencil. The legend stencil comes with the brainstorming diagram. So I'm going to highlight it and bring it in. I'm going to right click on the legend and go to configure legend, because that way I could take out the subtitle if I wanted. I could take out the column names or the count if I didn't want the count in there. And when I hit OK, and then I'm going to click here where it says legend, one click, I'm going to type course offerings. Course priorities, let's do that. I could rename these if I want. And then let's say I take over here, you have some stencils. So I'm going to take priority 1. I'm going to drag it over here. As soon as I do that, it drops it in. And if I want, I can rename that and I can say first offering. And then if I want, if I drag another one here, let's see, number 2. Or if I say, here, this isn't running, so not running. All right, so now let's say that I'm going to pull up my stencil. So you can see, if you remember how I'm getting my stencil, let's say that I want the logo on here, but when I put an image on here, you notice it didn't come onto the legend because it wasn't part of the legend stencil. But if I take the shape, it doesn't matter what shape it is, and I drag it onto the legend, it says you have placed a shape onto the legend. Would you like to convert it? If I say yes, it becomes part of the legend. So any shape you want to pull it on, if you go here, and let's say you go to Visio Extras, let's go to Symbols. Let's choose one of these, I don't know, sunny. Let's put the sun on here. So maybe you're using the sun for something, just drag it on top, say yes, it becomes part of it, and then you can just move it wherever you want. Now, when you take it off, if you delete the object, it comes right out of the legend. It's really, really nice. I'm going to save this diagram. Again, I'm going to put it in the my folder here. I'm going to call it Brainstorming because I'm going to go back to it later when I do the backgrounds. So I'm going to close that. Now I'm going to open the flowchart here because what I wanted to show you was I have this, this flowchart that I had created. And if I wanted to use the legend on here, I would go to More Shapes, Business, Brainstorming, Legend Shapes. And then what would happen is I would pull up the legend. I can then, let's move this down so we can see it, take the legend box. I could configure the legend. I'm going to take out the count and the subtitle. And then I can use whatever, I could say low importance. I can say this is important, and it adds it right to the legend. So even though the legend is part of a different diagram, you can use it in other diagrams that you want. So if you want to categorize your symbols that you're using on the diagram and show certain things by using the legend, mostly for your flow charts, maybe workflow diagrams, maybe your organizational chart, then this is a great feature to use. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one. Maybe I'll save that. All right, now I'm going to open it up. So that's the brainstorming one. So you can see that you can use the legend in other ones. You can use the brainstorming. It's a great way to create a different type of diagram. Now what I want to do is I want to go into floor plans because I want to show you how to use layers. So I'm going to pull out the office layout. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too, you notice that when I go to File and I go to New, you probably notice that I have a lot of diagrams. And that's because we're using Visio Professional. If you're using Visio Standard, you're going to have less diagrams. Now, the ones that I'm showing you in class or in the session today, you're going to have. But you may go to like the floor plan one, and you notice how I have all these different floor plans. You may have like 1 or 2. If you have 1 or 2, then that just means that you have the standard version. So there's some features in the professional version that work more than, so it's going to give you more diagrams. There might be some features that don't work that you might be missing if you go to use it. I don't think there's a lot, but I can't think off the top of my head. But if there's something missing, it just could be the version that you're using. So, all right, so back to the floor plan. So I'm going to pull out some office furniture. I'm going to pull in a corner here, and you can size them. And then I'm going to pull in a chair. And of course, you have your little, rotate buttons, so you can rotate it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these two objects, and I'm going to go to the Home ribbon. And on the Home ribbon, there's a button here that says Layers on the far right-hand side. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to choose Assign to Layer. So I've selected the objects that I want to assign to this layer. I'm going to hit New, and I'm going to call it Corner Bottom Left, and hit OK. So now these objects are part of this layer. Then I'm going to take, let's see, I'll do a conference table, and if you size it, you can make the table smaller. I'm going to put a let's see. I was using the 2010 version at home, and I just noticed that this one doesn't have as many. So let's see. I'm going to go to the maps and floor plans. I'm looking for, let's do furniture, see what we get. Okay, I need a plant. So we'll do a plant. And I was going to put a, we'll put a small plant on it. I was going to do a computer and stuff, but oh well. So I'm going to highlight these objects now. I'm going to go to Layer and do Assign to Layer. And then I'm going to call this one New Top Right Corner. So creative. And hit OK. So now I have my objects. So I'm going to go to Layers, Layer Properties. I'm going to uncheck all the visible boxes and hit OK. So there's nothing on my page right now. I'm going to go to Layers, Layer Properties. I'm going to choose the bottom left corner and hit OK. So there's the first layer. You can do this with any other diagram. It doesn't have to be the floor plan one. It's just one that makes sense sometimes when you're working with it. And you can overlay. So you're kind of overlaying your layers on top. So, if you have a workflow and you show part of it and then you do another layer. So if I go to Layer Properties now and I do top right corner, now I have that layer. So you can just bring up the layers that you want by creating them here. Now, if you want to get rid of them, just check your boxes, select them, and hit Remove. Now, don't panic because it'll delete all the shapes, but when you say yes, it's not removing the shapes off the diagram, it's just removing the shapes by taking out the layer. So when I hit OK, the shapes are still there now, they just weren't in a layer format. But you can still, when you go to Layer Properties, if there's something that you wanted to just hide, you could, if you needed to, and that wasn't the one I needed to, but you could say, I don't know what those layers are. Those are different. Okay, I see what I did. So it did take them out, and they're separate, but you're separated, and you can then use them that way. So the layers, now, there is, for the floor plan, there is like some different, like what you want to display and things like that. But again, that one has a particular ribbon with that one that you could play with. So that was just an example of layers. Now, I'm going to close this one. I'm going to bring up the org chart diagram, which is under Business, org chart. Now, if you're using 2010, you will have an org chart wizard. That would be the one I would want you to pick. In 2013, you have to go with the org chart diagram. Then the wizard will come up. And I'm going to import, but before I do that, I am going to open up my Excel spreadsheet so you can actually see how I have it laid out. So over here I have supervisors. Since John Doe is the big cheese, he doesn't have a supervisor. But then he is assigned to these people. And then we have Tom James, who has these people under him. So I have a supervisor column. I have a title column. I have a department column. So you might have more information on here that you want to include, and that would be fine. But I just wanted you to see how I had it set up before I import it into the org chart in Visio. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm losing my mouse here. I'm going to open up my Visio. I'm going to go to the org chart, and because there's my import, so I'm going to bring my import button to bring up the import wizard. I'm going to import the information from Excel, so I'm going to hit next. Then it asks, what do you, Exchange server, directory, an ODBC compliant data source, or in this case, we're pulling it from Excel. I'm going to hit browse. If this is the one, I better make sure that that's directed to that one. Hit next. It says reports to. Choose the column in your data that contains the information it defines. So reports to, I picked the supervisor because that's the one that's going to set up the layers. I'm going to hit next. Name, title, department is what I want displayed. I don't want pictures. If you have 10, it doesn't ask you that. Hit next. And I want to specify how much is displayed on the page. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to hit finish. Let's see what it does. Now, one of the things that, now if I did Control A and I hit show hide, that will take the pictures off. I can then, increase the size of the text in there if I want to make it look better. One of the things I noticed with the 2013 version is I don't like how it imports it. So like if I select the supervisor here and I change the layout, you can then like click here, go to layout, kind of quickly fix. I like how it does it in 10 much better. It seems to import it much better. And if I deleted someone here and I hit relayout, it would automatically lay it out perfectly. But for some reason, 2013, their relayout button, I don't know what it's thinking and what it decides to do. Thank goodness I have an undo button to, adjust what I need to adjust. I can, if I need to, move things manually, which you shouldn't have to do. But I felt like the best fit to page and the relayout button in 10 works much better than 13. 13's kind of quirky to me. So, but, you have to do what you have to do. But you can see that it took the information and it imported it all into my org chart. So now I have a visual org chart from my Excel spreadsheet. So hopefully that'll help you next time if you're ever needing to do that. And I wanted you to see what it looked like. So now I'm going to close this diagram. And I'm going to, actually, I'm not going to save this one. I'm going to hit don't save. I'm going to bring up the background. Which one did I do? That brainstorming one. I'm going to bring back the brainstorming diagram. And I wanted to talk about backgrounds. So on the design ribbon, if I pick a background, let's say I pick as the world, I end up with a background page. I'm going to delete this one because this one didn't have anything on it. And there's two types of pages. There's foreground pages where the diagram's on, and then there are background pages. And background pages, you can have things like borders, titles, maybe you want to put your logo on there. So if you right-click on page 1 and you do page setup, this tells you it's a foreground page using this background. I can name the background, so if I double-click on it, I'll call it world. And if I click on the page and I go here to fill, I can like change the colors if I want. And whatever I do on the background page is going to be reflected on whatever diagram I'm using the background for. So let's say that I go to design. I'm going to add, let's say I add a title. So here's a title. It's going to have a date. And if I wanted to, I could click here and type course offerings. If I wanted to put in a logo, I could bring up my stencil here and take that logo that I had earlier, put that in the corner. And notice that if you've ever worked with PowerPoint and you've had master slides, whatever you do on a master slide appears on all slides. It's kind of what you're doing with backgrounds, okay? You could also create your own background page. So let's say I insert a page, all right? Notice it's using this background, so I don't want it to. So I'm going to call it Ocean. I'm going to right-click on it, go to Page Setup. I'm going to make it a background page, and I'm going to say I don't want it to use any, I want it to be blank. So I don't want it to use any background on this page. And then what happens is it ends up over here. Background pages cannot, you can organize them within themselves. You can't actually. You can move regular pages around, but you can't move background pages. Background pages always stay at the end to the right. If you have multiple pages in here and diagrams, background pages are always separate. I'm going to quickly pull a picture from, let's go back to Bing. And let's pull in the, I'll type Ocean and hit Images, just to show you how to make an image of background. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this one here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it into this one. I'm going to go ahead and drag it. It's going to distort it a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to size it. Then I'm going to go to Control, Picture Correction, change the transparency to make it a little more transparent. I am going to do a another page. I'm going to take out the background on here. I'm going to paste this. Whoops. No, what did I do? Oh, I didn't copy. Okay, so let's, actually, you know what? Let's just forget that. It doesn't matter. So let's say we had shapes on here, and I want to use a different background on this page. You just go to Page Setup, pick the background that you want, and there you go. So whatever, you know, shapes I put on here, that's my background. Then the background doesn't interfere with the diagram. I know you can take this and drag it right on top of a diagram if you wanted to and send it to the back. But if you do that, then what happens is if you try to edit the diagram or move it, the background interferes with it. This way, the background is separate, but, you know, and you can just, like, let's say I highlight this and I move everything. Notice how this particular, the title is stationary, the logo is stationary, and the background is there, so I can do the Control A. And then if you want to save your background, because you can't use backgrounds that you customize, you can't access them through other diagrams, what you can do is I'm going to do Control A. I am going to group them. Then I'm going to hold my Control key down and drag it to my stencil. And I'm going to call it World Background. And I'm going to show you how to use it on another diagram. I'm going to save my stencil. Remember, if I close this and I didn't want to save, remember I'm saving my stencil. Save. And then it asks me about, it always will ask you the stencil first and then the background. So I'm going to hit Save. I'm going to quickly open up another diagram. So let's open up the flowchart one. I'm going to bring up my stencil. Now, I know the page layout is a little different than this one, so I'm going to go ahead and create a background page. Call it Ocean. Oh, no, World. Then I'm going to drag it on. And I'm going to have to do some quick adjustments here. I know it's off a little bit, but there we go. I don't know what happened there, but that's okay. And then I'm going to finally say I want to use the world background on this one. So you can see how you can put it on your stencil, and you could create one that's vertical, and you could create one that's horizontal, depending on what the page setup is. And then that way you can use that background that you created on other diagrams. So, and then finally, another thing you can do too on the review ribbon is you can shape reports. You can send that flow chart. I'm just going to show you, run it in Excel, show you what it would look like. It's going to take the data that was in your flow chart and dump it into Excel, and then you could keep the columns that you want and the columns that you don't want. So I know we've kind of run out of time. I do have to ask that question so someone can win the Office, the Microsoft free Office version. I hope you enjoyed this session. I hope you picked up some tips today in things that you may not have been aware of, and this kind of enhanced your Visio skills. So my question is, what diagram do you access the lead from? And the first person to respond will win. The legend box. Yes, Loretta, you won. Yay! Everybody clap for Loretta. Yay. So you've won the free Office. And Bob will, I'll let Bob know. I don't know. He will get to you and get it to you. So I don't know how he will. He'll probably send you the code or whatever. But thank you for participating today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I look forward to you attending the next session. Next month will be Access, creating tables and working with databases, getting started in Access. So thank you for participating, and I look forward to seeing you next time.